Hello everyone, welcome to a beginner's guide to cameras. In this video I'm going over the 4 basic things you need to know for photography. I'll be using the Canon 4000D for this video, and I'll also be using the 18 to 55mm lens. To demonstrate everything I'm going to tell you, I'm using this empty packet of gum. The first thing I want to talk about is aperture. Aperture is how wide the shutter will open when you're taking a photo. This will affect the depth of field. To get into aperture priority, turn the dial to AV. Aperture is measured in f-stops, but it gets a bit confusing sometimes. That's because a small f number means the aperture is very wide, but the depth of field is very shallow. Similarly, a large f number means the aperture is very narrow, but it gives you a much greater depth of field. So here's an example. I took this photo at f4, and you can see how blurry the background is and how it makes the packet of gum stand out so much more. This will be handy for portrait and product photography and stuff like that. Now we're going to take the exact same picture, but this time we'll take it at f25, and the hope with this, or what should happen, is that everything in the photo is extremely sharp and you can see all the detail. This will be very handy for landscape photography. Now let's talk about shutter speed. Shutter speed is how quickly the shutter will open and close when you press the button. To get into shutter speed priority, turn the dial to TV. Shutter speeds can range from as quick as 1/4000th of a second to as slow as 30 seconds. Obviously both of these are two extremes, and you'll most likely use something in the middle of these, but which shutter speed you use depends on the situation. This photo was taken at 1/2500th of a second, and as you can see it looks like I'm holding the box still. So this kind of shutter speed will be good for a situation where there's lots of movement and you want your subjects to look as sharp as possible. For example, a sprinter running down the track or a car driving past you, if you want those to look as sharp as possible, you'd use a really fast shutter speed. This photo was taken at 1/100th of a second, and even though I wasn't moving very fast, it still created motion blur. So going back to the example of a car, if you want there to be motion blur while it's driving past, you can use this kind of a shutter speed. Exposure compensation is a handy tool for making your photos look brighter or darker in camera. ISO refers to a camera's sensitivity to light. So on this camera it goes from 100/6400, and on other cameras it can go even higher than that. So in very well lit conditions, like outside on a sunny day, you'd use 100 ISO, and the darker it is, the higher up in the ISO you'll go. It's important to find a balance between shutter speed, aperture and ISO when you're taking a photo for optimal exposure. So for this photo, for example, I took it at 1/2500th of a second. Now obviously the shutter is not going to be open for very long, so I want to make the camera as sensitive to light as possible. So for that I had the aperture very wide at f4, and even though it doesn't say it on the screen, I had the ISO up at 3200, so that's pretty high, and that allowed the camera to absorb as much light as possible in that fraction of a second that it was taking the photo. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.